What's up, LEGO builders? Last week I built the mightiest mech in the Protector army and might have officially cooked humanity in the process. But they still have one trick up their sleeve, one so powerful, up until now it wasn't even part of the conversation. Today it's time to pull back the curtain and show you how humanity won the Biowars as I built a state-of-the-art stealth bomber. If you're ready, don't forget to go stealth mode on that like button and let's get started. When it comes to bombers, there are two main options in my mind. First is the classic long and gangly looking flying fortress type of build. Massive wings and engines to give it an almost unlimited range. Then you have the stealth bombers. Looking more and more like something out of a sci-fi movie, these incredible machines can travel silently and nearly unseen, dropping their payload out of nowhere. Of the two options, I'm more of a fan of the traditional bomber design. However, I need to consider my parts collection, which has been greatly depleted due to the city and armies I'm currently building, especially in the slope department. So I think given that constraint, a simpler craft similar to the B2 will be more feasible, given it's basically just some giant wings and a cockpit. Armed with that knowledge, it's time to sling some brick. As usual, I'm starting with the cockpit windshield because that'll help dictate the size and design of the aircraft. Unfortunately, my windshield collection is about as strong as your will to finish your homework on a Friday night, so I don't have much to work with. This bubble canopy is my best bet for now, and even has a built-in attachment bar which will be helpful. I've found that molded inverted slope pieces like this work like magic for the nose. The concise, sharp angles help shape the underside of the craft without needing a lot of pieces and provides a nice hollowed out area inside for the controls and pilot. I never built interiors for my vehicles growing up, but that's something I've really tried to change recently because I think adding a cockpit makes for a more interesting build process and video, plus it just makes the vehicle feel more complete. This ship needs a lot of controls and a high-tech targeting screen because if its payload misses, you're looking at more than just a dented car or two. You might take out 2 city blocks and a pizza place, racking up the war crimes, which is obviously a bad thing unless you're the Galactic Republic and the war crimes are being committed by this guy. We're off to a pretty good start here. The windshield lines up great with the rest of the cockpit, and overall, everything looks pretty aerodynamic. Now I can start the wings. These need to be thick and wide, considering this plane is basically all wing. I had a number of dark bluish gray 6x12 wedge plates that when combined create a very cool wing shape. I attached a few smaller wedge plates to further hammer out the design, and tiled off as much of the top as I could. I'm not one who has to have all studs covered, but in this case, a stealth bomber should look as sleek and smooth as possible. I also built some designs into the top for more detailing, adding the HADF dark green highlights. The engines are on the wings as well, represented by this dark green build. The top's all done, but the underside is very flat. This is where most of the body will be, and I need enough depth for a bomb bay and so that it looks like it won't fall apart after hitting a large gust of wind. Thankfully, I was able to scavenge enough of these 1x6 inverted slopes to create a tapering belly that should be tall enough for what I want to do. I only had so many slopes though, so to take up the remaining space, I built a large slab of tile set on some hinges that can open and close, mostly matching the angle of the slopes, finishing the sides of the body. Looking at a typical stealth bomber, you can see the wings and body are basically one and the same, so all I really need is a roof to connect everything and finish shaping the plane. I toyed around with some pieces till I got the right look and assembled a spine of sorts that will connect to the top of the wings and the back of the cockpit. I employed the use of more slopes to get a more gradual transition to various parts of the ship. That's one of the coolest aspects of the B2 in my opinion. It literally looks like one single piece was constructed and turned into one of the most expensive and dangerous weapons on the planet. Once the spine is done and connected to the other pieces, it creates one solid build with a large opening in the middle for an interior. But it also still needs a tail. There isn't really any semblance of a tail fins, or any other kind of rear structure to a stealth bomber, so I'm going to go that same route and just build a stubby little end that tapers with the help of wedge plates and slopes, just something that looks aerodynamic and stealthy. I'm not gonna lie, this design was a lot easier to build than I thought it would be. It's basically all slopes and plate. I wish I could say the same thing about the heavy bomber coming up in the future though. After all that, I'm left with a sweet little bomb bay that I didn't even have to build. For the door, I found these handy tiles that have clips attached to them, so all I had to do was add more tile and a line to create the door. I built 2 of these, and now the bottom can open and close, releasing the bombs. Fun fact, this is only the second time in my life I've successfully built a bomb bay for an aircraft, and I'm really happy with how it looks. There's one very important yet often overlooked feature still needed: landing gear. This isn't a Republic gunship, so it needs a solid set of wheels for taxiing to and from the runway. I found some wheels that worked perfectly and attached 2 to the front and 2 to each wing, and those flaps from earlier can act as storage areas for the landing gear to fold into once the bomber takes off. It was around this point something interesting happened. I had finished the bomber and was trying to move on to other builds, but I kept coming back to it bothered by something. After some contemplation, I realized it was the windshield. Yes, it matched up with the cockpit, but it didn't fit with the rest of the plane. The canopy bulges out in almost every direction, making it look like a bubble was stuck to the front of the plane, like some kind of Disneyland ride. Once I realized that, there was no moving forward until this was fixed. Luckily, I built this in a modular way, so the cockpit can be almost entirely disassembled without needing to break too much of the body or wings. I pulled apart pretty much the entire cockpit and raised it up with higher walls using 2x3 slopes instead of the 1x3s. That way more of the nose is actual plane and not glass canopy. I found I had another one of these pieces, which is the same one I used for my LRAC dropship a few weeks ago. It's much more fitting for a military craft and has a much lower profile, and sure enough, as soon as I put the new canopy on, the entire vibe of the ship changed. It looks more menacing, like an eagle or a falcon, which I think is a much better image than the previous canopy and its bulbous pelican look. Let me know in the comments if you think I made the right choice here or if I should have stuck with the old design. So, a bomber is really only as dangerous as its payload, and this one will carry something truly special. The termite guided bomb. A relic of the Biowars, it was used to destroy the vast underground hives created by the burrowing bio-nightmares that once acted as miners. It's being brought back into action because, well, the HADF might have some digging to do. There's one more build to do before we learn what the HADF is planning, and that's a fuel truck. These bombers don't run on hopes and dreams, so it needs a dedicated ground crew and fuel to get it ready for each mission. I really struggle with simple vehicles like this. It's weird, I can build giant mechs and skyscrapers, but ask me to build a garbage truck or a motorcycle, and suddenly my mind looks like this. But part of the reason I make these videos is to improve as a builder and not just make things I'm comfortable with. I want to push myself to get to a point where I feel like I can make a decent model of whatever it is I need. Part of the reason I struggle with vehicles in this world is because it's sci-fi. Everything needs to look and feel like it just rolled up from the future with crazy wheels and panels, but how do I do that with a common fuel truck? I decided in this case to not worry so much about that and just focus on making something that looks good. It's a basic utility vehicle after all, so it doesn't need a bunch of bells and whistles or a crazy paint job. I did try to add as many details as I could to help sell its function. Hazard strips on the sides, head and tail lights, as well as warning stickers on the actual fuel tank. And lo and behold, this didn't end up looking like a Duplo truck. And that's it. The wait's finally over. It's time to unveil one of the HADF's most destructive fighting machines. Hundreds of miles away from Moenia Prime and its chaos, night reigns quiet and undisturbed over this HADF airbase. Then suddenly the red lights come on. It's time to fly. The war for Moenia Prime has quickly turned south. New heavy class mechs have been deployed, wrecking the HADF front lines. Recently, one fought its way into the industrial complex, knocking out power to almost a third of the city. Up until now, the HADF Air Force has been kept on a tight leash, but with this sudden turn of events, conversations have begun to turn to humanity's mightiest weapon, bombers. Until now, bombing one of their own cities, even with a precision strike, was wildly out of the question. The potential collateral damage coupled with public outcry could further destabilize the city to the point of complete collapse. But the options are quickly disappearing. So a hero of the Biowars has been awakened from its slumber. This MRCM Reaper hasn't flown a mission since before most of the ground crew was even born. But being well maintained, it and its crew are ready for action. As the bombers towed out onto the runway, the payload arrives. The mission is to drop the bomb on Lantern Industries, where it will penetrate down to the lower levels deep underground and detonate, hopefully annihilating the factory and anything else hiding there. But as the bomber was being prepped, a potential back door into the Protectorate headquarters was discovered, postponing the bombing run until the raid is complete, since HADF Command is desperate to learn anything they can before bombing the mech headquarters into oblivion and burying its many secrets for good. Overall, I'd say I'm happy with this build, though it is on the small side. Originally, I was planning for something much larger, but my parts collection and timeline said otherwise. Not a big deal though, because the Reaper is primarily used for quick precision strikes, since using the heavy bomber and carpet bombing Moenia Prime might cause more problems than it solves. I'd like to tweak the cockpit some more so it doesn't jut out as far, but overall, I'd say this challenge was a success. One question does remain though. Will the Reaper come knocking at Moenia Prime? Don't forget to let me know what you think of the build in the comments, and until next time, happy building.